an acclaimed director, a legendary director, Aґнєшка Holland. And so applause, please. Yeah, one round of applause. Thank you, thank you. We do it as always. First, I ask a few questions to Ms. Holland, and then you're going to have an opportunity to ask your questions. You're going to raise the hand and get the mic. So I'd like to start, if you don't mind, with your latest film, Spore. Mm-hmm. This is such a curious film, I mean, in terms of genre, because I don't think I have seen, you know, an animal-loving thriller before, you know, like with the dark comedy elements. And so my question is, it's quite dumb, I'm sorry, but how much do you relate to the main character who thinks that animals need even more protection than people, and that people are more cruel than animals nowadays?
Well, you know, part of myself is inside of this character, I mean, this, but I'm not completely Duszejko. I don't want to spoil the film because some of you will be hopefully watching it tonight.
Yes, yes.
So I will not tell the story, you know, and the plot.
Yeah, you speak such a great Russian.
No, I don't speak. It means I understand. Я понимаю все по-русски, но говорить мне тяжело, потому что я не говорила уже долгие роки.
Okay.
Года.
Okay, great. So you say that you just said. I'm sorry, I interrupted you. You said that part of you is the main character, but not all of it.
Yes, but what was, you know, she's like 60-something years old woman, very close to the nature, very you know, courageous, brave, fighting, believing that one needs to fight for she or he believes in, but in the same time, as an older woman living in the Polish countryside, she is transparent to the people. Her words, her opinions, her fights doesn't mean anything to the society, which is ruled by a powerful man, represented mostly by the local hunters. And the hunters it's a real thing. It means that the people who are hunting the animals and killing the animals, but it's also some kind of the local elite. The hunting is something which is specific, but also which is metaphorical. So she's fighting those, you know, those people who are killing the animals in short story. But in the same time, she is representative of her generation. And when I was casting the film, and I tried like many Polish actresses of this age, half of them was telling, it's me, it's about me. So I think it's something, you know, which expresses some need of the justice, importance, especially the need to have the voice. And I think that most of women, and especially older women, they feel that they are voiceless. So it is also in some way the gender story, to some extent. But what interested me in this film is that it's in the book in the first place, because it's the adaptation of the novel by famous Polish woman writer Olga Tokarczuk. And I always wanted to make something out of her literature, but most of her novels are very complex and very literary. And this one was relatively simple, at least what we thought, to adapt. But after when I tried to like take one layer out, when analyzing it, it appeared that under this layer is another layer and another layer and another layer. And the writing was actually long and complicated, and the shooting as well. It was a big challenge to me, stylistically speaking, because I realized that that is not the movie you can describe in some few words. It's something which, as you said, in terms of the genre, is escaping any kind of the qualification. And it's why we also had the problem to finance the film. I knew that the film is not very expensive, but more expensive than average Polish contemporary film, because we needed 4 seasons and we needed a lot of animals and special effects and so. So we've been looking for the co-production money, and anytime we tried to pitch the film, the people didn't know what it really is. They didn't, they say, okay, but
they got confused.
What kind of the film it is? And I came with one sentence, which I think in just way describes the film, but in the same time was intriguing to them, that it is anarchistic, feministic, ecological thriller with the elements of black comedy and fairy tale.
Nice.
So
nice. A professional, yeah.
After this, they say, okay. And, in some way it helped, to put the budget together.
This is such a beautiful movie. We're not going to spoil it for you. You will see it today. It's premiered in Odessa Film Festival. I have a question about your previous project, In Darkness. I mean, the feature film, your previous feature film, and it's just for somebody who didn't see it. It's about like Jewish people hiding in sewers in Lviv, actually, in Ukraine. And I mean, it was part of Poland at the time. And
it means in the time it was under
Soviet
German occupation.
Okay, under German occupation.
Yeah.
And it tackles such a hard subject. And you told that, you spent like 5 years, developing the film and then shooting it. And so the question is actually, how much does this subject, change you personally? When you have a big project, a big feature film, and how does it change you?
Actually, I did 3 movies about Holocaust.
Yeah, exactly.
And I wrote another 2. So yeah, I did spend quite a long time, in this reality, longer time actually that the Second World War was taking place, and it certainly changed my vision of the world and made me. Why I wanted to tell the subjects in the first place. When I'm doing historical movies, I'm not doing just to make some kind of the reconstruction of the history and to paint some kind of the tableau of the past, but I do it if I'm feeling the relevance that is relevant with what's going on today. And when I was analyzing the history of the Second World War and the Holocaust tragedy and all elements of this tragedy, I realized that it didn't end really, that the Second World War didn't end, that what we are living now is it's like a cancer, which you can cure the cancer, but never completely, these cells are present in your system, and the relapse is always possible if you forget that you need to be really careful. So I think that the totalitarian and authoritarian and racist and nationalistic danger is present all the time. And now, especially during the last few years, we can feel it in Europe.
We can see the relapse, actually.
That it relapsed. And it didn't relapse because it was some kind of the vaccination against. The Holocaust was the vaccination against this kind of the disease. And suddenly we see that with the new generation, it doesn't work anymore. It still works in Germany because it was very strong, self-infliging process. But in other places, it didn't. So the movies, in some way, to remind the experience and also to let the people experience it in sensual and emotional way. Of course, I don't believe that the film can change the history or change the world, but it can help to wake up some kind of the sensibility and the imagination. And when I was doing those films, I didn't have impression exactly that I'm dealing with something which is closed, which is over. I think that the 20th century didn't end yet. And we've seen it also in Ukraine very strongly, with Maidan and what came later. And now we see that the European Union you want it to be the part of, is in deep crisis. And suddenly I see my own country, Poland, which is supposed to be the success story of the transition, that they are also relapsing to some kind of the bizarre authoritarian, dream.
Just today I saw the news about the protests in Poland against, the judiciary reform, and yeah, something
well,
crazy happening.
The new government, which it's very strange kind of the, ideologically government that is, conservative, nationalistic, Catholic, right-wing, but also socialist in the similar way, like the Nazi party was social nationalistic. It means they are playing on all those pianos, but the main goal is practically to take Poland out from European Union, which represents not only the economical union, because that is fine for them, they want the money out of the union, but also some club of democratic values. And suddenly, they try to sell to the Polish population that those democratic values are not sexy anymore, that we don't need it, that our security and our national pride is more important than any kind of the, global collaboration. And it works, not for everybody, but it works for big part of the population. And they are like dreaming about these times when, somebody, the strong ruler, told them what to do. Miloš Forman, who I know pretty well, when the communists fall down in Poland, in Czechoslovakia, in those countries which been under the Soviet influence, he said that he doesn't believe that his compatriots Czechs are ready for the freedom. He said, the socialism, communism, or however you call it, this regime, which was Soviet regime, it was like zoological garden. The animals have been in cages, they've been not free, but they've been fed by the guardians, and they've been separated from the species which are dangerous for them, so they've been safe somehow. And capitalism is like a jungle. It means you are free, but you can die in a moment, and when you are not smart enough, you can die. You can starve in the hunger.
So you want to get back to the cage, actually?
Yes. The freedom is something really difficult for the people. I think that the cage, in some way, they can gather in the cage and they can believe that they are free. They don't need real freedom. But that is, of course, it doesn't explain all problems and all the consequences and of the transition to the...
Okay. Let me open it for you, okay.
But it shows how complex and complicated the human nature and human needs are, and society, how complicated it is, and how easy is to divide the people and to let them believe that this one who has whiter skin or darker skin is your enemy, and not, that it's not human, and that you can kill him eventually.
Well, you dealt with censorship when you started your career in the 1980s, when what we called there and then and now, when the Polish New Wave emerged in cinema, and you even had to, leave the country to go abroad. But in your interviews, you said that it was like the best years of your filmmaking career. Can you comment on that? Why do you say that?
Well, it was possible. First, I was young. After I had the luck to belong to the generation of the talented filmmakers, and my colleagues who've been a bit older, or one generation older, like Andrzej Wajda. They've been on the same wave as we've been. So the filmmaking community was extremely solidary, and creative exchange and human exchange and political exchange, and the common fights with the governmental or party censorship put us together and made us quite strong group of the influence. not only artistic influence, but also somehow social influence. So it was the time when this feeling of the solidarity, especially in the filmmaking community, I'm speaking about late 70s, was really existing and was really strong. And in the same time, the censorship, in the same time, the Polish regime, Polish communist regime in those years, having been too cruel and too consequent. And the people who've been ruling the countries or ministers, they really didn't believe in that. They've been just conformist or cynical, but not extremely, you know, extremely motivated. So it wasn't so difficult to navigate with them, to, you know, to push the borders of the freedom a little more. Another thing which was great, it was that they've been interested only in some section of the political censorship. It means you were unable to speak against Soviet Union, you've been unable to speak against the Communist Party, but all the rest was practically open to discuss. And using the metaphor or symbols, we've been even able to practically criticize the regime. But on artistic side, the choices, you know, how to tell the story, how to, you know, how to cast the film, we've been free. It means artistically we've been free very much more than I was or I am when I'm doing movies today, especially in America or even in Western Europe, where the box office issues are very powerful, and you know, and it's very difficult to find the money and freedom for the movies which are not obviously commercial.
Well, I just wanted to ask, yeah, about the way you adapted to the new system when you had to leave Poland, and like, you know, from the outside, it seems like a great career. You're making beautiful movies, and so what were your biggest struggles, you know, what were your biggest fights that you had after you left Poland and had to work in different countries and then come into Hollywood?
Well, in France or in Germany, it wasn't so difficult. It means it was difficult because difficult to make the movie and to convince the people, the producers, to fight for your movie and the financiers to give you money and so. But in the European system, till now, it's changing now, but till now, it's relatively easy to make the films which are not commercial, maybe too easy even. Maybe, you know, this combination of the public funds and the grants and so makes it quite easy to make the film which is not really well prepared, well written and well thought, and which forgets the needs of the communication with the audience. So when I started to work in France, or I did some movies in Germany, my main problem it was the fact that I'm in the country which is not mine, that I don't know the language well, that the reality of these countries are for me more exterior. That was my own reality. So it was more personal problems, not the systematic problems. In America it's different because American cinema and American television, it is the industry. And the rules of the industries are very clear. And the people who decide how the film has to look like, they have the rights, legal rights, to recut your film, for example. So there the struggle have been much more complicated. And the communist experience helped me actually, because playing those games with the communist governmental representatives or party representatives, it taught me that, you know, that you have to be very political, and that also that the people, even the people of power, have their weaknesses, and that by the end of the day, only thing they are worried about is to lose their jobs. And when you are watching the Hollywood executives, their fear is to lose their jobs. So you have to convince them that it's better for their jobs to follow you instead of like break you. But you know, it's never like win-win situation. It's never 1-0 situation. It is a complex and complicated process. And entering some kind of the system, like for example American television, even ambitious cable television, one has to understand that by the end you can lose some assets. So It is different. It is different than doing personal auteur film in Europe.
Well, and one of the great things actually about Hollywood that they always need new blood, and they notice talented directors like you. I mean, when they saw you, recognized you, and invited you for the project. But maybe they do not give you enough.
They do, but after they try to cut you into the box, they want the new blood, but they want after that this new blood becomes like the old blood. So the fight is always to preserve your identity, which is not easy, but it's possible.
Okay, and I have a very silly question, but you were one of the few directors, one of the first directors who, discovered Leonardo DiCaprio. And I think, in Total Eclipse, he gets the most risky role of his career. He would never do anything like that, today. So what it was like, I'm sorry, it's from tabloid question, but I mean, can you comment on that?
But I think Leonardo is still a very talented actor and very, courageous in some way. It means his choices, his artistic choices. He's not doing any movie. He's doing the movie with the directors he really admires and respects. Maybe even too much so, Maybe he can go to adventure himself to different areas as well. But in this time he was a kid. He was just a very young man. And he has this incredible magic, which partly disappeared with age. So I convinced him to on the role quite easily, and part of that it was that he was listening to his father, who is important to him, and his father was kind of the intellectual hippie American, who knew Rimbaud exactly and who knew that that is a great subject for his son. So I had the supporter from George's DiCaprio side, and Leonardo was great in work. After we kept in touch for several years, till after Titanic even, but after it drifted away, that he started to live in the places where I was not going to. But I met him recently, 2 years ago, after his last film, before last film. And the conversation was wonderful. It means he didn't change so much. I think he's smart, talented man who cares about the things, not only about the beautiful models, but also about the planet.
I think he cares about beautiful models too. But
yeah, not only.
Not only. Okay, and you were one of the first great directors who discovered television before it became fashionable, before it became sexy. I mean, you worked on such great series like The Wire, Treme, The Killing, House of Cards. So how did you discover that medium for yourself?
Well, I started to be disappointed with Hollywood cinema, not only Hollywood, but even American independent cinema, and I realized that it's more and more difficult to make the movie which is new, original, and challenging, and which doesn't have this terrible casting pressure that you need to A-list actors every time. And when you are doing smaller movies, you cannot have them because they are doing bigger movies. So this process became very frustrating, and also I realized that practically the several important subjects or interesting subjects or the new subjects are disappearing from the cinema, and I was always interested in something which, as a filmmaker and as a viewer, also. In something what the critics in 80s, 90s called the cinema of the middle, and which was the core and heart of the cinema, of European cinema and American cinema, especially in 60s and 70s. It means the movies which had important complex subjects, personal point of view of the director, but in the same time they've been attractive and accessible enough that the big audience was following them, was watching them. And after, the cinema started to go into direction, the very commercial franchise kind of the movies, or local comedies, romantic comedies, this kind of the films, or the festival movies. It means the movies which are often personal and original, but mostly too extremely, slow or extremely, you know, one-dimensional to attract the wider audience. It means it happened something which happened to the music before, that the music which was wonderful and the popular in the same time practically disappeared, and you have the modern music, which is, I love it, but it's non-accessible for, you know, 95% of the people, and you have very popular music, pop music, which is like cynically produced by the, you know, by the people, but this empty place in the middle of cinema in some way was taken by television, by inventive television, and I realized that it's where I can find the stories which are new but in the same time attractive, where I can make something without thinking that I need absolutely A-list stars to finance whatever. But you know, on another hand, especially with the series, especially if you are not somebody who is shaping the series, who is shooting the pilot or first episodes and deciding how the series looks like, after the director is more the servant, he's serving somebody's vision. And you can make small difference, but you will not make, like, you know, big difference.
Is it true that on, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but is it true that on House of Cards they didn't let you to shoot the way you wanted? I read it somewhere.
Well, you know, I came on the season 3, and the series has been established and formatted by David Fincher, and he wanted in exactly, you know, way. It means to shoot with some set of the lenses, not to use the camera movements which are handheld or, you know, or steady camera. I mean, it was very classically and quite statically shot the show, and that was the handmark of that. It means when I'm coming to a series like that, I have to accept it. But I wanted to push it a bit, you know, just a bit. And it was fun, actually, because the guardian of the style was not the cinematographer, because they've been changing every year, but it was camera operator, very smart and very talented camera operator. And when I wanted to make something differently, he reminded me that that is not the style of the series. And so we've been teasing each other, you know. When I came last season, I did something in 2 seasons, 3 and the last one.
Yeah, the last one, yeah.
Yeah. And in the last one, I came on this first day or second day of the shoot. I told him, listen, maybe we'll put 50 in the lens, which is normal lens, actually. And they've been mostly using more wide lens, 35, you know, like 40 max, and 28, something like that. So I said, let's put 50. And he looked at me and he said, you know, in season 3, the 50 was used only 38 times, and 33 times it was on your show episodes. So I say, okay, so you know what, put 65. And you know, we've been like that teasing each other. But I knew that I cannot change the style. It's not what they are expecting from me. And the people love the series also because it has such a distinguished style, and I have to be loyal to the initial creator of the series, and you know, respect his choices. Some series are giving more freedom, you know.
Like The Wire. The Wire is one of the greatest. One of the greatest.
Yeah. It was very free from this point of view. And on Treme, for example, I established the style, and after my colleagues had the problems to following it sometimes. But that is, you know, that is the medium of the writer in the first place, the television series.
You once compared the TV series to this, you know, serialized great literature of 19th century, you know, like of Balzac, of Stendhal, of Dostoevsky.
Yeah, The Wire for sure is like that. Yeah. And Sopranos was somehow like that. It was like Balzac, right? Yeah, I think that the audience has this need of the epical dimension. And the series are responding to this need. And also in terms of the psychological development and the characters, you have the time to really develop it. You know, the format of 2 hours movie in some way is limited. You cannot, I feel it when I'm doing my future films. Mostly they are too long, you know, because but in the same time they are very packed, because I'm packing like I have the suitcase like that, and I have so many things, so I have to pack it into the suitcase, and don't have the space to like develop or wander or something. And in the series you have the space.
Okay, and coming back to your roots, like you said that you perceive Andrzej Wajda as like some kind of mentor, and so what were, you know, like the greatest lessons that you got from him? So what did you learn from his work, or maybe from him personally?
Yeah, you know, it's difficult even to resume, because it was so much of things, and it was like working together and living together and observing him, and you know, and talking to him. He had something which I have also to some extent. It means he was pretty eclectic. His movie making, it was very distinguished, something in his style, especially in the earlier movies. But after, in some way, his way of telling the story accommodated to the story. In every of his better films, he has at least one or two like great cinematic scenes, which are making them Andrzej Wajda's movies. But you cannot learn something like that, because it was his specific talent to suddenly find the image or find the situation which will express something much bigger than the situation itself. But his approach, the way he was like entering every next project, and the depth of his, you know, work and the reflection, and the constant question about how I can tell this to the audience, how the audience can communicate with me. The communication was for him crucial, and that it was a big lesson, because not every filmmakers in this time when I was growing as a filmmaker had this kind of the approach. Especially in communist countries, when, you know, no one was counting box office. And even if the movie was too popular, they've been unhappy, you know, the government people, because it gave too much of influence to the film. So, but it was always important for him. And he was, you know, his way of see the reality was very specific. And talking to him about the projects or about the movies was very interesting, because his point of view was always different from, you know, from the critic point of view, or from the regular audience point of view, or other filmmakers' point of view. And in his 80s, he created the film school in Warsaw called the Andrzej Wajda's Master Film School, which he gave a lot of work into that, and he participated in the workshops, and was giving the advices to the young filmmakers. And it was every year is some kind of the international workshop there, when the young filmmakers from over Europe are coming with their projects, which are developed, which are real. It means the projects which mostly have some part of the financing already, but they are developed a bit like Sundance Lab. And, you know, after those projects are analyzed by, you know, the advisors, and Wajda was the main advisor there. And I took part in that. And after they are shooting this scene, after we are, you know, this kind of thing. And I accepted it 2 or 3 times, not because it's so interesting for me, but what was interesting for me, it was like, watch Wajda when he's giving the advices, because it was never like straightforward, like in the, you know, in the like simple way, not the efficiency, not the primitive efficiency. And I realized that most of the young filmmakers, they didn't get it. They didn't understand, you know,
what kind of advices did he give?
Well, I don't remember the precise, but I remember that in some point, it reminded me the advices with Anton Chekhov was giving to the young writers, which been always very respectful and very delicate, but destroyed their story in the constructive way, to let them to give them the possibility to reconstruct it. For example, I remember one letter when he wrote to the young writer, it was something like that your story is really very interesting and sensitive, but I think that the main character, instead of being military man in 40s, has to be very young maid, woman maid, named Dunia, and she has, it means he told totally different story, but in the same time, in this totally different story was some great inspiration for the story this guy wrote, right? So Wajda's approach was a bit like that, but I didn't hear any other advisor who had this kind of the original and the deeply like inspiring approach. But of course, to be inspired, you have to be on some kind of the level of the openness, not to stick to your story and to think that that is totally genius. You have to see, okay, but yes.
I have to reconsider something.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And talking about your latest film, Spore, you said that this is the long question. I mean, you said that while filming, you were desperately waiting for snow, and then it snowed, and you remembered why does
But actually, we didn't wait for snow. We needed the snow.
Oh, you needed the snow,
and we have very short window where we've been able to shoot the winter part because of actors, because of
And Wajda said that every great director has weather luck.
Yes, that you recognize a great director after if he has the luck for the weather. So when the night we came to the location, which was far away from Warsaw in the mountains, and it was snowless, But in the morning when we woke up, the snow was there. And it remained for 2 weeks we needed, and after it melted. So I thought to myself, okay, I'm a great director.
What else do you think makes a great director?
I don't think I'm a great director.
No, you are. No.
No, I think I'm a good director, and I think sometimes I have the luck to make the movies which in some way, matters, and they have to meet also the moment. I think that the real luck you have is to touch something which is present now, but no one recognizes it, or very few people recognize it, and in 1 year or 2 years when your movie is out, suddenly it will be relevant. So not only politically, but also in terms of what the people feel and what they're interested in. So I have a little of the skill. Wajda had more of the skills, but I have...
You're very hard on yourself.
No. I don't have the complexes, but I know my limitations. So.
Okay. Which directors do you find great?
Today?
Yes.
Today it's more difficult than it was in
the 60s.
Yeah. That was the great generation of many great directors, till 70s included, I think. Maybe some of them was still working in 80s, 90s, but it came also from the fact that they've been the generation who experienced Second World War, and after the communism. So they, in some way, the big history shaped their character, and not only character, but also the way they've seen the world in its complexity. And after, the generation after, which is my generation and the generations later, even generations later more, especially in Western cinema, there are a lot of talented kids who are able to tell cinematically pretty well the stories, or very well the stories, but they don't have the subjects. In some way, they are like little bourgeois, spoiled kids, whose biggest experience is to have sometimes some problems in the high school, and that's it. And I don't think that you need absolutely to live through the tragedy to do something good, but I think that as a generation, you need in some way to feel to connect to the bigger thing than yourself. It's why I think that this generation of Wajda, Fellini, Pasolini, Bergman, Kurosawa, Tarkovsky, and so they've been stronger generations of filmmakers, and they became, many of them became great directors. And among the younger, it means those who are working today, in Europe, the filmmaker I'm always like receiving his movies with the great interest is Mikhail Haneke.
Okay.
And in Russia it's Vyagintsev.
Okay.
In America it's few of them, but they are much more entertaining, like Coen Brothers, or on the Paul Thomas Anderson, and Wes Anderson to some extent, but Tarantino. Yeah,
okay.
They are inspiring for me, but in different way a bit. They are not like touching the deepest existential issues. They are much more playful. It doesn't mean that they are not touching big issues, but in much more playful way.
I read that you enjoyed Farhadi, Asghar Farhadi films, the Iranian director.
Yes, I liked very much his film The Separation, and after the film later, I liked them, but I wasn't so astonished by that. It was a little less. It was a little less surprisingly deep to me.
Okay, every film director is very.
But I like many films, and many directors. Not that only those two, but if I'm speaking about somebody who I'm curious about every next film, those two are for sure important to me.
Every film director is very ambitious, and what's your biggest ambition when you make a film? Is it some kind of a statement, or you want to, attract the audience? Can you tell about that?
Yeah, no, I want to wake up some kind of the real emotions in the people. The audience is the most important, but of course to have the film recognized also on the critic level or festival level, not only the audience, and my peers, my colleagues are inspired by that. That is something, of course, you would like to have, and it happens sometimes and sometimes not. And sometimes, sometimes my fellows like the film and the audience don't, and sometimes the audience is responding and my fellows think that it's not so great. So it's difficult to please everybody, and also with the audience, what I realized, because the people are very divided today, ideologically also and politically, and not only in Poland but also in other countries. I realized quite a long time ago that I cannot please to everybody, I cannot speak to everybody, that I'm not, the Pope or the successful politician. I even don't need the majority. I need just enough of the people who will make my movie alive and who I really can communicate with. And once I was watching The Room in the cinema theater, like this one, which was full, and I thought, how many people who are here really can share my sensibility and my moral standings? And I think maybe 30%, maybe 40%, not more. I cannot please the others. It's just impossible. So it is important, and that is not the approach you can have when doing big budget American movies. When you are doing big budget American movies, you have to try to please everybody. It's why rarely they are really important.
And rarely pleasing everybody.
Yeah, but it happens. Not everybody, but
the crowds.
The crowds.
The crowds. And what would you perceive your mistakes, professional mistakes? So can you tell about that, and what did you learn from them? I mean, this could be like some kind of advice for aspiring filmmakers here. Did you make any, or maybe
I did plenty, but it's difficult to systematize them.
Okay.
And that somebody who is not me can take any kind of the lesson out of that. For sure, one of the mistake one is doing, and I'm doing quite often, or at least sometimes, is to take the shortcuts when the challenge is too complicated, It's to stop searching for the better solution or deeper solution. But on another hand, you have also to be spontaneous in some way, and not to prepare and predict everything, because after it very easily it becomes stiff and and dead. So to find this balance between, you know, the honest and deep preparation and the margin of the huge spontaneity, that is the most difficult, I think. At least in my way, I see the movie making. And I did a lot of mistakes on one direction or other. And I started also to make the mistake when I told to myself, okay, I have the routine already. I have, you know, I have the tools. I know how to shoot some kind of the scenes at least, and I have just to like exactly enter the spontaneous approach. And that it was laziness in reality, you know. Sometimes you cannot just let the spontaneous ideas happening on the set. And it's never too bad because I have this craft, but it could be mediocre. And the mediocrity is, I think, the biggest enemy of any kind of the people who has the artistic, creative ambitions, because mediocrity it's relatively easy and it can please to the people and not only the audience, not only the crowds, but also quite often the, you know, festival selectors, critics, and so. So I did the mistake in castings sometimes, not many, but sometimes I could cast the actor, choose the actor.
I think you're just too hard on yourself, actually. Yeah, because it's too hard. There is another question. There is a lot of talk about nowadays, just talk about discriminating women in different areas and in arts, of course, too. And you're like one of the rare and great examples of a woman director having a successful and career, longevity, all of that. So how did you manage to do that? And do you feel there is a need for like some quotations for, you know, women directors or, you know, cameraman directors?
Yeah, that is always a difficult question if you have to, you know, to make them some kind of the quotas. But in the same time, something like the glass, even not so glass ceiling for women in film industry exists, especially for directors and writers. And actresses also to some extent. It's why televisions became so important for women characters, that you didn't have practically like strong and original, powerful women characters in the movies for quite a long time, especially in American movies. Because, you know, the box office told and distributors said that it's impossible to sell well the movie with the women hero. On television, suddenly it became possible, and you have a bunch of great actresses who are choosing to go to television, who are chosen for television because they are fantastic and they are able to create so complex and wonderful characters that they prefer television than the movies, where they mostly play wives or mothers, you know, something like that. But for the director, for the women director, it's not only that it's much more difficult to get the money for the project directed, written and directed by the woman, but also the reception of this film is much more harsh than the boys' film.
Really?
If you have, yeah, absolutely. Also, the festival selectors are, you know, most of them, and important festivals like Cannes, for example, if they have the very good film by the woman and very good film by the man, they are picking the man's film. And the statistics are showing that, you know, it's only Palme d'Or in the history of Cannes, it was one woman.
Yeah, Jane Campion.
And I don't believe that it wasn't other great women who've been able to be there and to win, maybe. And also the critics, you know, when, for example, coming back to Jane Campion, when she did the movie, which wasn't so successful, the response of the critics was so personally brutal that I think she was depressed like for 3 years or 4. And you know, when I don't know, Bruce Besford, also Australian, did 5 or 6 not so good movies, he's not trashed by the, you know, by nobody. He has maybe And after 5 not very successful movies, he can still receive a lot of money. After 1 not so successful movie, the woman has a real problem to do the next one. So it's a lot of injustice in this, and it's coming from the deeper culture, gender, you know, situation. And in some areas, you can feel it in the politics, you can feel it in science, you know, when Marie Curie Skłodowska was, it's quite relevant even today, you know, for the young woman who wants to do something, especially in the science like mathematics or physics or chemical science. For example, in the politics, the quotas helped. In the quotas which started in Scandinavian countries and so really changed the landscape. And I personally feel that especially for the politics, women are better future than the men because they don't have such a, you know, incredibly narcissistic ego, mostly.
And women are better than men, you know,
yeah.
in general.
Yeah, I think so. That well, not every woman. Not every woman. I know some women, no, it means what means better. More, have more of social skills and more of the empathy and more of the emotional imagination and less of the need to prove that I am the best in the world, which makes men sometimes the prisoners of their ego.
Have you ever been discriminated as a woman director?
Well, to some extent, you know, yes. And if they wanted to give me the compliment, they thought that my films are like a man films.
Okay.
Which, you know, it's a bullshit.
Yeah, it's bullshit. It's bullshit. And if you
but you know, I don't want to complain. But I'm pretty strong, you know, and maybe I'm strong also because of my life story, because I took another battles, because I'm not somebody who, you know, kick down and he stays on the ground, but I have this Wańka wstańka, you know, quality. But most of women, they are very sensitive creatures, and sensibility is their asset. It's what makes them, you know, special. But also it's something which is their weakness and make them easier to be you know, kicked down. And when I'm observing now, for example, you know, when you see the film schools now. I was like observing Poland last few years. In the film school, you have as many women as men in the, you know, or maybe even more women. They are making better student films. They are winning most of the short films, you know, competitions. After only few of them are doing, you know, the long feature debut, and very, very few of them are doing second or third film. So this, in some way, the selection is very difficult for them, for many reasons, also for the, you know, biological reason, that is motherhood, that the society is culturally more giving, you know, space and support for men and so. But when I'm watching my female colleagues when they are receiving the prizes at this festival for short movies, mostly they are like that.
Okay. So very humble.
They are too humble, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Okay. I mean, in a few moments we're gonna take the questions from the audience. So you have to raise your hand and you're gonna get the mic and think about clever questions maybe, because my is not that bad. It's not that good. So and I have the question. Watching your films, it feels like, you know, lately you prefer working with Polish actors for some reason. Is there some kind of a renaissance in Poland in this way?
It was always a lot of great Polish actors. It was always very strong because we have very strong theater also, you know, and they are. So the Polish actors are not only film actors, but they are, you know, wonderful theater actors. And the theater in Poland is very innovative. It's not like just classical kind of the, you know, well pronouncing, you know, words. So it's a great, great school. I think that it's two areas when Poles are great, is acting and cinematography.
Yeah, that's cool. So do we have the first question? Who's got the mic? Okay. You have to stand up so we see you. Yeah, okay. And you need to, I think, if it's in Russian or Ukrainian.
Russian I understand.
Okay, and Ukrainian. Okay.
Hello, my name is Teodora Markova. I'm from Bulgaria. I have two questions for you. How do you deal with critics? Have you had experiences with really destroying critics? And second question about TV series. Do you participate in the script? And what if you have disagreements with the writers?
So about the critics, I don't know I understood well.
Like, how do you deal when you get the harsh critics? Like,
well, mostly I say, okay, that is part of the game. You know, I'm not reacting to that.
Do you still read it? Because
first critics I read, yeah.
Okay.
When my movie is open, you know, at the festival or in this, the first critics I read, especially not in every country, but you know, in like few countries. Of course, if they are good, it's nice. If they are bad, it's very not nice. But in the same time, it cannot like kill me completely. And mostly I react in the fatalistic way. Okay, it's what it is. Sometimes I tell to myself how stupid they are, of course. But I'm trying not to say it in public. But sometimes, you know, and it happened to me recently in Poland, which I was surprised myself. It was a guy who was writing about my movie, my last movie, in the very popular newspaper I'm reading always. And the guy is a writer, not the film critic really, but he has a column every week, some kind of the, you know, and I found him always, he's intelligent and pretty good writer, but at the same time, he has this a little like bon vivant, you know, a little like despising, you know, approach.
Arrogant, you mean?
Arrogant in the way which is self-indulgent, you know. Okay. And I read this about my movie, which was really very despising. And he also wrote that he likes my another movies, but some of the one he've seen before, it was so boring that he died of boredom. And I thought, fuck him, you know. I just, you know, he doesn't have the right to be so despised. I'm somebody who really, you know, who really maybe had to be more respected, that if he trashed my film, it is not in such a, you know, despising way. And it happened, you know, I was one day in Warsaw, and we've been giving, as a filmmaker, Directors Guild, giving some prize to somebody in the small cinema, which is close to our place, my place, and which is kind of the cinematheque. But it's also popular that the people from the neighborhood are coming and drinking something and so. And suddenly I see this guy. He's a neighbor of this.
Did you punch him in the face?
No, but I told him, fuck out from here, you know?
Yeah.
Because he was seated at our table, it was a table, and fuck out. He was totally, you know, he was totally like shocked. I was totally shocked myself. My fellow, you know, directors was like watching like that. Gośka Szumowska, who is a very like fancy Polish woman filmmaker, director, very talented. She was like clapping, she loved it, you know. But after I was ashamed, actually. I said that, you know, that was this outburst, which maybe it wasn't because of him, maybe it was because, you know, I have problem with the situation in Poland, and it's some kind of anger, you know, which is growing, and I have the less of tolerance to the stupidity or you know, exactly like arrogance of my countrymen. But I realized that sometimes that, you know, it's never completely indifferent what the people are telling about you, and especially about women filmmakers, they are more personal. It's something, it's not about the movie, it's also about me. It's much more than if they are writing about my male colleagues. So you have, it has to touch you somehow, and I can, you know, control it. But sometimes the control is just not good enough.
So you stay vulnerable.
Yeah, because, you know, it's dangerous also, because, you know, pretty early I realized that it's very easy to be destroyed by the critical, you know, critical papers or critical looks. And to protect yourself and to be able to continue, you have to build some kind of the armor around of you. But if you are building this armor, it's not only the bad things we are not going through, but also good things. So, for example, all the, you know, prizes and awards and recognitions, it really doesn't touch me too much, you know? It doesn't give me enough of joy. it's because I have to protect myself also from the bad, and that it's not like good, because you have to have the possibility to enjoy the good things. But to enjoy the good things, you have also, you know, to suffer from bad things. So anyway, it is complicated. And the second question was series.
Yeah. So do you have a chance to, you know, contribute in terms of the script and like that?
It depends. It depends. You know, it depends if I am in the process of the development, or if it's miniseries, for example. And I did several miniseries. Much more. My input is like a bit like in the feature film, written by somebody else. If it's a series where I'm coming in the middle of the series, it is much less. A bit, it depends on the writer after. For example, when I first time came to the House of Cards, it was season 3, and I was, it was Bo Willimon, who was the creator of the series, who was writing, who was like, you know, controlling everything. And I was doing 2 before last episodes. And he gave me to read the last episodes of the series. And I thought that some solutions are wrong. So I told him that, you know, it's not right, that he has to kill somebody or not kill somebody, or, you know. And actually he did it. He did it. I wasn't sure if he enjoyed the fact that I'm suddenly, you know, because most of directors who are coming to the series, they are very humble. They are not, they are speaking about, you know, eventually to change some mise en scène a bit and, you know, storyboarding, but they are not like putting the fingers into the writing of the development of the characters and so. So it was a bit like, you know, unusual from my side. And on the other hand, I say if he wants somebody like me, it's maybe that he can take advantage of my opinions and experiences, and he did. But I didn't know if he really enjoyed it, or maybe no. But now he called me like a month ago or something, and told me that he has a new series which he's starting shooting in the fall, and if I want to make the first episode and first and second episode and you know, the format the series.
Oh, that's really cool. You're gonna shape it visually.
Yes,
yeah,
yes.
It's great.
Which I did with the Tremere, but
yeah.
In American series, the only one I did. So it proved to me that he actually enjoyed the fact that I'm melting myself into the writing also decisions. But I think that you have some creators of the series which are so, you know, closed for this kind of the input, that they will not accept it. And once, I don't want to tell with whom, the input of the writer on the set was so big and so like crippling that I left the series after 2 days. I thought I cannot shoot it.
Okay, we can take another question. Yep, here, this guy, I think he's. Yeah.
Good afternoon. Thank you for coming to Ukraine. I have 2 questions, if I may. The first question, you mentioned that you got lots of difficulties in your life, and my question would be: have you ever been in such existential situations, in such a dilemma that you wanted to be out of this profession? And how have you dealt with that? Because it's very difficult in the countries, like in Ukraine also, to become a professional that can earn from this profession. It's always nice to follow your vision, but it's difficult to survive sometimes. And secondly, as you are about to make, I hope, a new film, which is co-produced, might be, with Ukraine, could you tell us why are you driven into this film? What would be your you mentioned that also, but I wonder how much of that would be of Ukrainian nature. Will it be Ukrainian, or it will be your objective view on this situation, or subjective view? I mean, something that will how to put that properly, but yeah, I think because you have, I mean, what I want to say, you have lots of different stories that you probably would like to bring to screen. You're in this age, in this stage, that you are very selective, I suppose, in what you want to make, right?
Right.
And you were about to make this story. So
Okay, we got the question. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
And we need to give the mic like there. That's like in the back. Which one do we start? Do we start with?
If I wanted to quit.
Have you ever, had this temptation?
Well, you know, in some point I realized that that if I will be the young student today, I will be in the high school, and I will be deciding about my profession, it will be probably not the cinema. And it's not because I was like, I had the difficult moments, of course, especially after I emigrated. First, in the beginning, after the film school in Poland, when I was like politically non-acceptable, persona non grata for Polish Communist Party. But I was so much helped by my colleagues, and especially Wajda, but also Krzysztof Kieślowski and Zanussi. And Wajda was so like helpful that he proposed me that he will adopt me, you know, that he will give me his name to create some kind of the child, which I didn't accept, but it was extremely touching and very, you know, very important thing he did for me. But for like 3 or 4 years, I was unable to push any project I had. And I knew that is because of the, you know, political censorship, personal censorship. After when I was in some way forced to stay in Western Europe, I went to France after 81 when was the martial law in Poland. I was like, I was considered somebody who will finish in the prison if I'm coming back there. And I found myself in France without speaking French and without knowing practically anybody. Again, Wajda helped me because he was shooting downtown there, and he like helped me in many contacts and so. But it was a very difficult time also, like few years, and I was with a young daughter, she was 9, and I didn't know how to, you know, how to survive. But in the same time, it was the only thing I knew to do. So it was too late to become the doctor or something as good as a profession. But after now, I think that the cinema lost its importance somehow. That what was so exciting in the cinema exactly in the 60s and 70s partly disappeared, and it became lesser activity. It's not something which can change the world, really. It's mostly exactly, it's too much of mediocre choices you have to make. So today, you know, I don't know, maybe I will, if I will be young me, maybe it will be not the cinema I will choose. About the second question about, yeah, you are right, that aging, and I know that my time is limited, and that especially future films takes like 2-3 years of your life, and my decisions have been pretty wise. And I told to myself that I will be not doing anymore the historical movies about the 20th century past, because I did some, and I think that I told what I had to tell about it. And then, you know, I received the script by Andrea Chalupa about the Welsh journalist Gareth Jones and his travel to Ukraine during the Holodomor, and the implications of the, you know, Western governments and Western journalists and correspondents to Soviet Union in this tragedy, and the, you know, cynical lie about what's going on, cynical or political, whatever. And I found the story and the point of view on this Ukrainian tragedy very relevant. It means it is not only to reconstruct and to show this tragedy, which was already shown in the movies, but not in a very successful way, but to find the intermediary, the story and the style also. And the movie, it's not like docudrama, you know, it's something more complex and more artistically written. To find this intermediate, to tell this story, it can, I think, help the people to understand something which is very urgent today, not only about Ukraine, but about the, you know, the wider scope of the, of our situation. So, it was difficult to resist. And we are in the process now to putting the money together, and we have the big part of that also because the Ukrainian Film Fund decided to give us the grant. I wanted from the beginning, but didn't know if it will be possible to shoot as big part of the part, especially Ukrainian part in Ukraine, and we are now scouting for that, and hopefully it will the shooting will start the beginning of next year if everything is coming together. So and I think that the film is the film which will be challenging for me. Because again, finding this style is not so obvious. It's not only the realistic, historical drama. It has some kind of the subjective quality which has to be found, and also it's connected in some way to George Orwell, who've been inspired by the fate of Gareth Jones and exactly what he's seen in Ukraine. And Animal Farm was inspired somehow by this experience, so it has some connection to George Orwell as well. And George Orwell today, who've been writing dystopic stories about the totalitarian societies, he's becoming the most read writer in America of today. That if you are looking at the sales of the books on Amazon, the number one is 1984, which shows that, that the history didn't end and that we are coming back to the questions and dangers we've been obvious in 30s of the last century. So I think it's something really relevant in this story.
It's great that you're planning to shoot in Ukraine, because as far as I know, you didn't have a chance to shoot in Ukraine when you were filming in Darkness. You didn't shoot it in Lviv or anywhere else.
Yeah, we wanted to, but it became too complicated somehow.
Yeah, okay. We can take another question. Who has... okay, yeah.
Спасибо, пани Агнешка, за эту встречу. Вы, как режиссер из четверки легендарных режиссеров, которые сделали революцию польского кино и вывели его на мировой уровень, у вас наверняка есть свои критерии, что такое хороший сценарий. И вот, если можно, поделитесь с нами, что для вас хороший сценарий, какие его основные критерии.
I think
you don't need a translation. No. Okay, great.
I don't believe in the handbook of script writing. It means it can be helpful, but I don't believe that every film has to have 5 acts and this turning point and such development of the character and the arch. I think what is great in the theatrical movies, in the cinema, it is that it may be much more capricious and personal and unexpected than, for example, commercial cinema or the series. The series, even the best series, has to follow some rules and some conventions, which the cinema mostly follows as well, because it's also the storytelling is encrypted in our cultural development, For example, when I was learning the scenario screenwriting in the film school in 70s, I was, they've been giving us Aristoteles' Poetic as exactly the blueprint for the construction of the story. But if you are reading, the American guides about screenwriting, you see that they are exactly repeating the Aristoteles rules. And when I was writing my own script, without thinking about it, after when I analyze it, it mostly responded to those rules. It means it's my European or Americano-European and way, Greco-Christian way of perceiving the stories and telling the stories. It doesn't mean that you don't have to break those rules sometimes. And some of the best movies in the history of the cinema have been exactly not so well constructed, not so obviously well constructed. When you are doing TV series, it has to have some conventional storytelling because you need the audience not only to watch this one episode, but you want them to want to come back for the next one. So you have to create some kind of the, you know, of this narrative structure which will keep the curiosity about what's going on strong enough. And that is a bit primitive, you know, it's not extremely sophisticated, and it has to be efficient. So it's in some ways much more easy to judge if the series script is good than if the film script is good. Sometimes I read the film script and I don't get it really, but I feel that it's something really exciting inside. But it's difficult to analyze. For example, you know, the Polish movie, I don't know, you probably haven't seen it, that was Polish movie, the first film by the woman director, Aґnjeszka Holland, called in English The Lure, about the sirens, two sirens. The musical about two sirens in Warsaw in 70s.
I haven't watched it.
You have to see it. It's the most original Polish film, and actually it was trashed by Polish distributor, unfortunately. But it was in Sundance and received the prizes, and it became one of the most successful movies, independent movies in the United States of last year.
Now I feel ashamed.
Yeah, you have to watch it.
Yeah.
In Polish, the title is Córki Dancingu, the daughters of dancing.
Okay.
And anyway, Agnieszka Holland, who I knew before, and I knew her short films, found a really talented and wonderful young woman. She asked me to be her artistic supervisor, because for the first film you need from the Polish Film Institute that one has a supervisor like that. And I read the script and I thought, fuck, I don't understand what it is really, you know. I feel that it's something really very original, but I cannot, and I told her, listen, I cannot help you really, because it's like reading poetry, you know. I don't understand how it will look like, so I cannot give you the real advices. But she insisted, so I finally accepted, and actually I got the film only when I seen the first cut. It means I didn't get it from the script, even if it was very faithful to the script, what she shot. And then I really, you know, was paid her back with her trust, because I was really fighting for the script, because they wanted, distributors wanted to recut it completely, and, you know, producer wasn't strong to fight for that. So I helped her to finish the movie in the way she wanted to, and it was very, very good and very successful, you know.
Yeah, this is the example when the script was not
that
made
is the
by
example
the rules.
when the script was, and also the distributors, they read the script in completely different way that it was written. They infused something which their imagination was very kitschy imagination, and she did something, you know, highly original. So yeah, and I think that the best movies maybe don't have the really good script. But if we are speaking about average, yeah, you have some rules, and you can, you know, you can to see if the story is interesting, if the characters are, you know, developed, if the, you know, if the tension, you know, breaks, in the ending it's satisfactory, and so on.
Okay, we can take another question. I know that there is a lady here in the first row.
The microphone.
Okay. Yeah. Sure.
Okay,
yeah,
so
and we'll then bring it here. Okay. Thank you.
Obviously. So you mentioned those harsh critics towards you being a woman in Poland.
Not only in Poland, and they've been not telling you are bad because you are the woman. It was some kind of the, you know, language and some kind of the emotional approach, which I think will be not there if I would not be the woman.
But nevertheless, there's a kind of big shift backwards going on in Poland regarding women, and not only women. So I wanted to have your impression on what's on events going on Poland. Are you surprised, having immigrated and living there too, about what's going on nowadays?
Politically speaking?
Sorry?
Politically speaking?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, you know, yeah, I'm kind of surprised if the danger was approaching, and I can watch that, I can feel that some deep change inside of the society can open the gate into this kind of the politics, which is and to have the support for this kind of the politics. But Polish theater is also very special because I don't want to go to the details, but that is actually a great story for the film because the bad guy for me, and who is like the hero for many Poles, and who is ruling the country without having any kind of the constitutional responsibility. It means Jarosław Kaczyński. He's extremely complex and complicated and tragic human being, and so full of hate and resentments, and in the same time, the power, the power of will, that you can make out of him the great character for the Shakespearean, TV series. So as a filmmaker, I am very interested in to observing it. As a citizen of Poland, I am deeply saddened and very worried because I see that Polish history is unfortunately repetitive, and mostly it's very, unsuccessful. Mostly we are finishing in the bath of blood, and our only victory is a moral victory, and which I don't think is so useful by the end of the day. Those last 26 years have been probably the most successful years, with the great potential for the future, even with many mistakes, of course, and the people who've been neglected and the things which have been neglected. But all overall, I am taking it as a big chance for Poland, for its future. And now I see how easily and quickly it can be totally destroyed. And that we are coming back to the situation we've been in 19th century, in between the First and Second War, during the Second War, after the First, and so on and so on. So I feel I feel despair and anger, and I ask myself what we can do about it and why the people accept it so widely. But in the same time, is some kind of the hope that they are so that the rulers, Kaczynski and so, that they are so extreme and so radical in their division of the country that they actually will be paying for that soon. The question is how soon and how much they will destroy in the meantime. They are destroying the institution, they are destroying the constitution, they are destroying several democratic rules, but they are destroying also the schools, education, the non-governmental institutions, the cultural institutions. So they are very fast and efficient in this destruction. But they are destroying also, the trust which Poland achieved to have among the European Union. And that is evaporating very, very quickly. And that is very dangerous because European Union is also in some kind of the, deep crisis and can change to something which where will be not the place neither for Poland, neither for Ukraine. Because I'm speaking to the Western politicians quite a lot. But anyway, I'm meeting them occasionally, and the attitude and the feeling is we did the big mistake. It was too early and unnecessary to extend the union to the post-communist country. They never really dealt with the communist heritage, and they have some gene of the, of the authoritarian gene inside of the societies, and it spreads also to our territories, and it's like, and it's very, actually, of course, it's stupid somehow, it's not so simple as that. And but yeah, it is a real danger that that the Europe will be divided again. And Polish stupidity, it's one of the big issue in this process.
Okay, we got time for just the last question. Who has the important one? We have actually a lady here in the first row. She's like, okay. Well, what's happening there? Yeah. Okay. Well, I mean, we should stay optimistic. There is no other way, it's like...
Well, by the end, the light is mostly winning, or always winning. But the question is, what are the casualties?
Okay, casualties. Okay.
Hello, my name is Anna Harnik, actress. from Ukraine. Actually, I have two questions. I'll try to make them short. So first one is, you have mentioned that you don't see cinema as powerful as it used to be before. I just wanted your, maybe some kind of forecast. Where does it go now? I mean, the modern cinema. How do you see its development in the future? In terms of just maybe only your feelings or ideas, topics, whatever. And the second question is, I really like this idea you mentioned, Andrzej Wajda's, like, how can I tell this to the audience? This important question. Actors sometimes don't have these many possibilities. I mean, sometimes they just invited and waiting for the job. What would you suggest to actors would have some also strong like political and other social positions to, they want to say something, for example, do you favor if actors contact you directly, like, oh, I want to participate in that, can you try me, like, you know, missing some casting or whatever. So just, yeah, your advice, perhaps. Thank you very much.
As about, you know, the cinema, I don't think that the end of the, like, important cinema, but I think it's the stage where it's weaker than it used to be, like, I don't know, 40 years ago. But the time is changing, you know, and why the cinema became more boring? Because the audience also became more lazy. And it became more lazy because it was, in some way, they've been not challenged by the reality somehow, and they lost the curiosity. The curiosity is the main thing why, you know, the art or any kind of the important issues can to be received by wider people. They have to be curious. They have to be curious about the different people in the first place, and about the strangers also, and about the world. You know, they have to be curious, and they become curious in the moment when they are shaken by the life, you know, and shaped by the life in different way. So I think that as dangerous the situation in the world is today, it's probably much better for the good films. I don't know if I will be happy because of that, or I just prefer like nice, quiet life instead of, you know, very shaky and rocky life and the good cinema. But yeah, I think it's changing now. I think that it's more and more of interesting subjects which are suddenly present also in some projects. And as about the actors, yeah, I know it's difficult because you have somebody who is sitting next to your cell phone and waiting that somebody will call you. But I think that it's important to create some kind of the creative groups, and the good theater troops are the groups like that, but not only. And it's also possible, you know, to do something by your own, the monodrams or the things like that. And it's also, I think that the best thing is to have the circle of people who are thinking creatively in the similar way, and to be the part of that. Because the most destroying is the total loneliness and the feeling that you are just forgotten, like the, you know, chemodan on the train station, and no one is even curious about what you have to give. Polish actors, they are traditionally also politically quite involved. So, for example, as a head of this new movement of the opposition toward the official government are many actors, and some of them are in some way, you know, for example, Krystyna Janda, who is Andrzej Wajda's actress from Men of Marble, Men of Iron and so, and who is very important figure. She created the theater, 2 theaters in Warsaw, and she's the director of those theaters and, you know, the head of the manager of those theaters. So she's somebody extremely energetic and very active, not only in acting, but also to creating the cultural institutions of her own. But when the political situation changed in Poland, she was one of the first to take, you know, the flag up and telling that we cannot accept it, and she triggered the biggest so far, the opposition movement, and only one successful with this government, the movement of women, the black protest, in the moment when they wanted to completely to pass the law which makes any kind of abortion totally illegal. And suddenly it was like hundreds of thousands of women on the streets on one Monday. It was so many, and even in the small cities, dressed in black, that the government, that the Kaczynski became scared of that, and he actually made, decided to put the law on the, on the hold. And it was Krystyna Janda, who it means the Polish actress, who started this movement. And now when you are going to Facebook, you see several actors, younger and older, who are in some way in the avant-garde of the political fight, but also the fight for the free culture and for the free art. So, and the people are listening to them. It means the actors have some potential of the voice, that they are not necessarily only the voice of the playwrights or screenwriters or directors, but they are also the voice by themselves. And I think, I think that it's possible, not, some people think, we're stupid actors, but I think that the fact that you are playing different characters and that you are playing different texts, which are sometimes extremely deep and, and wonderful and artistically very powerful, makes you in some way wiser person. It means you have to live, you have to pass those emotions and those sensibilities and those experiences through your body. So in some way you open up to the different kind of empathy the regular people have. It's why I love actors. I think that they are the special race, That, for example, when I'm shooting with different crews over the world, the English is a bit different from German. The American have different habits. The crews are different. Like the countries are different, and and the habits are different. But the actors ever play the same. And if it's a huge Hollywood star, or if it's the actor from small provincial theater in Poland or Ukraine, they are exactly the same. And they have the same needs, they have the same generosity, the same emotional courage, and the same needs of love and understanding. So in some ways, a special family.
Ladies and gentlemen, please give a lot of love to Agnieszka Holland, a really great director, but too humble to admit that. Thank you very much.
Thank you.